astronauts of the Third Reich traveled in time from 1943 to 1990, according to claims. World War II, most terrible event in history of mankind. However, it should be noted it was the tinderbox that largely served the technical advance of the 20th century and the most terrible event. However, the technical advances were made. No matter how disgusted we are with all the misdeeds, the desire to become the first in various industries has remarkably accelerated developments, including the space industry. A few people know it, but from former Nazi specialists helped the U.S. develop space science and military development, and the secret projects of the Third Reich were on the verge of science fiction. As early as 1939, the first manned flight of a spacecraft based on the V-2 was made. However, the first tests failed. The device exploded at the time of launch pad, that is. 3 months later, they tried again. This time, the rocket was able to reach a height of 45 kilometers from where 2 pilots jumped on parachutes. The same operation was performed 3 more times in 1940 and 41, and each time with success. The pilots returned by parachute, and finally, in 1943, the secret and greatest attempt was made. According to the chronicles extracted from the secret archives of the SD, the testimony is unequivocal. Following personal instructions from Hitler, 3 of the best Luftwaffe pilots were carefully selected for space flights. The training was carried out in the strictest secrecy for about a year, with the participation of the best specialists from Germany and Europe. There is also evidence that before the launch of the rocket into space, a welcome telegram from Hitler arrived at the Peenemünde base, in which he expressed his gratitude to the 3 pilots who were willing to sacrifice themselves in the name of the glory of the Third Reich. A 2-stage rocket designed for these 3 pilots was built in the Mittelwerk underground rocket factory. Its launch was planned for 1944, but due to the turning point of the war, the deadline was shortened considerably. Despite this, 3 military officers, Holtz Sigmar, Heinrich Volt, and Schulz Feinberg, made a successful flight for the first man-made spacecraft. One would not be able to believe this if it were not for the documents obtained. In 1944, near the Mittelwerk plant, Soviet troops captured and further explored a strategic facility. The fact is that in addition to the construction of spacecraft, this plant was engaged in the creation of the atomic bomb and V-shells. In the mid-1970s, the obtained documents were declassified. It turns out that in addition to the space program to put people into orbit, it was planned to build an orbital weapon which would be a focusable mirror. The task was to concentrate solar energy for the subsequent burning of entire cities. Can you imagine? The drawings of this weapon are still just drawings. To make such weapons intended to threaten the existence of mankind a reality, bursts of energy from the sun, concentrated in a beam of energy, could pierce our planet as well, violating the integrity of the Earth's mantle. The most amazing thing about the story is that all 3 astronauts survived. However, they returned to Earth after 47 years. In 1990, in the Atlantic Ocean, an American destroyer noticed an unusual object on the surface of the water. Inside the capsule were 3 people in strange suits, vaguely reminiscent of diving gear, with several layers of foil and thermal insulation. While on dry land, the 3 crew members came to their senses. They were immediately sent to a special center for the study of near-Earth space, where they underwent a thorough check. It turned out that all 3 astronauts were healthy and feeling well. Of course, for them, returning to Earth was a shock, especially when they found out that they were launched into space almost half a century ago. This can only be compared to the resurrection from the dead, quote-unquote. They turned out to be German, but did not have any documents with them. On the capsule, it was a faded image of the Luftwaffe coat of arms. Although at first the Germans were reluctant to answer all the questions, in the end they were forced to talk. Holtz Sigmar and Heinrich Voll claimed that after entering the Earth orbit, a breakdown occurred in the compartment with Schultz-Feinberg, and it was depressurized. His own capsule was autonomous, but due to a control failure, he was in a state of loss of control. His trip was basically a free fall. On the third day, the men were exhausted and fell asleep. They woke up when they heard a loud ringing in their ears. A green flash appeared before their eyes, which turned into a tunnel. Then the capsule with the astronauts was literally sucked inside. After flying for several minutes, they found themselves in the middle of a desert landscape. The sand was orange-red. There were 2 suns in the sky, and they did not remember anything else. How the German pilots ended up on Earth and why they did not age after 47 years in space is a mystery. What is most surprising is that according to the documents, 3 people with these names were actually on the Luftwaffe list, and all 3, quote, died while carrying out a secret mission, end quote. But the amazing oddities don't end there. The sailors of the American destroyer who discovered the German astronauts in the vastness of the ocean found neither water nor food in their space capsule. Therefore, one can only guess what they ate for 47 years. After returning to Earth, the astronauts began to age rapidly. Already in the year 2000, only Henrik Voll survived. He was repeatedly put into a state of regressive hypnosis, where he repeated his story in detail. No further information could be found, as if nothing happened to him before the flight and after. In 2004, he also left. At the time of his arrival in 1990, he looked like he did in 1943, a 36-year-old pilot in the prime of his life. He died old. His body has aged half a century during his 10 years in the United States. All this history is saturated with mysticism. Astronauts from other countries were unprecedented with similar movements in space and time. Where did the Germans go? How did they manage to survive? According to American reports, the German capsule could not protect the pilots from cosmic radiation, and it's generally doubtful that this development was launched into orbit. But the strange signs, the accelerated aging, and in fact the appearance of a device based on the V2 with the coat of arms of the Luftwaffe in 1990 cannot be attributed to forgery. As it becomes clear, the question of what their mission was is becoming more and more important and relevant, because the question of where the capsule has been with the Nazi astronauts for all these long years and why it seemed that they were sent into space just the day before, it is played. And an Arab, in the event that, let's say for a minute, the capsule was in near Earth orbit, and the Nazi astronauts were suspended in suspended animation, could they really be in suspended animation? That's the question. It's known that Arab carried out large-scale work in this direction. Experiments were carried out on prisoners and several different methods were tried simultaneously. What has actually been achieved is that this data is now being carefully concealed by all the states of the world, into whose hands at least some material on it has fallen. It goes without saying that the experiments that can be considered experiments of immersion in a state of suspended animation were carried out in ancient Egypt and were practiced by Tibetan lamas. According to the researchers, the secret orders, in particular the Brothers of the Rose and the Cross, had considerable access in this direction. According to lore, they could both go into suspended animation and come out of it at will. Who knows, maybe one of the Rosicrucian recipes somehow ended up in the Arab's hands. Therefore, there are a number of unexplained mysteries. The first is the very fact that the Third Reich launched astronauts. Quote, "It's beyond incredible," end quote, said Robert J. Huxley, one of NASA's top experts. He says, "We could not even imagine something like that. The very fact that the Nazis had space technology during the war already turns all our ideas upside down, but the 47-year-old flight must be considered a true miracle." Then the problem of the survival of these 3 amazing astronauts. We were talking about it, the problem of suspended animation, the problem of the disappearance of the capsule from our coordinates. Therefore, the words of the NASA expert are understood. Quote, "We still have no explanation of what happened. We received 1,000 questions and practically no answers," end quote. And this is what Discovery Magazine wrote about it. Quote, "In the United States, as you know, there are almost no secrets, especially from the insolent press, which, if necessary, can penetrate anyone and anywhere. When the rumor spread that the German astronauts, actually fascists, were under NASA surveillance and blockades, a whole rush of reporters and cameramen moved there, that they had to be disappointed. Apart from the brief official statement, NASA leadership did not give any information. The reporters were not allowed to enter the territory of the center," end quote. By the way, there is a pretty convincing version that Werner von Braun knew about the launch of the 3 astronauts but never told anyone. Who knows, maybe something like a prick in space-time also happened in this case, so the 3 Nazi astronauts have information that is simply impossible to assess. But it may well happen that they have no information because everything that happened to them, as it were, passed beyond their awareness. Of course, these 3 Nazi astronauts could never have been launched from the Third Reich test sites that were part of our world. They can be the news of another world, another Third Reich. Who knows how the subsequent development of events took place there. And Werner von Braun, for that reason, simply did not know anything about it. But let's leave the development of this theme, the theme of the parallel Third Reich, to science fiction. Let's take a look at some more possibilities. For example, that the 3 Nazi astronauts were actually launched into space to make contact with aliens, quote unquote. Is this possibility completely ruled out? Given the connection of the Third Reich with the Mahatmas, this possibility is also not excluded. But the space-time gap factor, which was not anticipated at launch, could serve as an entirely different scenario unfolding. Not the one it was supposed to be, according to the mysterious Hitler mission. It is impossible not to think about the fact that the Luftwaffe astronauts picked up in the waters of the Atlantic actually have nothing to do with the Third Reich, although they themselves may not be aware of this. How is this possible? As an example, the German astronauts who were actually launched half a century ago from Peenemünde were soon intercepted by aliens, and then from the study of their organisms, replicas were synthesized, like 2 drops of water similar to them, which after 47 years appears before the eyes of the astonished American sailors of the destroyer. There is not a word about this in Discovery, but there is the following sentence. Quote, "We only managed to learn from one of the experts, referring to NASA, that the study of the German spacecraft and the survey of its crew can give extremely important results for the future development of this area, in America, even all over the world," end quote. So it goes without saying that it is possible to combine a real spaceship from the Third Reich with real dolls of Nazi astronauts. Therefore, the history of space exploration by the people of Earth includes many secrets. Their number is not decreasing, but growing. And now this one is included in your list, The Secret of the Astronauts of the Third Reich. And this is on Collective Spark by Inhale Ancient Mysteries. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.